okay, but it's been, yes, it's been busy. We've been definitely impacted by it.
Right.
As New York and some other places. So alhamdulillah, been okay. But it's been, yes. I think on YouTube it's delayed.
Yeah,
20 seconds or something.
Yeah, they're about half a minute.
Let me silence my cell phone.
So I think, so it's 5 o'clock. Let's give folks a few more minutes, I think, to join. We have few already.
Okay.
Mehboobai, just as a question, what's the format? Should we be encouraging people to put on their videos, or is it just mostly focusing on Dr. Abedin and only having his video?
It's Dr. Abdin's video because we are also recording the YouTube, right? So it's more town hall style. So Dr. Abdin will do his speech, and then we'll try to get questions through the chat room.
Awesome. Okay, I think we can get started. We're already 4 minutes in. So Assami, everybody who's in the lobby and who's listening to this, I of course, Dr. Abedin needs no introduction. Everybody knows him, but today we're going to be talking about the most that we can make out of our Ramadan that's about to start. Of course, we all know that Ramadan this year is going to be a little different, and Dr. Abedin is going to spend some time with us talking how we can make the best out of it. Dr. Abedin, I hand it off to you, and we'll take questions via the chat. And I think, Dr. Abedin, you could let us know if you want to take questions and answer them during your lecture or speech, or do you want to hold it till the end and address the questions?
It really doesn't matter. I think we can do it, because sometimes people might hear something and they have a question. So they can type it in. I may not be able to answer right away. I may defer the answer to the end, but that way at least they can log in their questions so that we'll have the appropriate questions. Inshallah.
Great. Okay, I think you can take it away, Dr. Abedin.
Go ahead and start. Okay. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. A'udhu billahi min ash-shaytan ar-rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Alhamdulillah. Wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulih al-Mustafa sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Amma ba'd, my dear brothers and sisters, all praise be to Allah. And I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless our Prophet and Messenger Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. We're going to talk about Ramadan today, inshallah. We have about a week left before Ramadan starts. And it's important during this week that we all make the dua that the Sahaba used to make, which is Allahumma ballighna Ramadan. Oh Allah, allow us to live until Ramadan comes, because they never wanted to miss out on the tremendous rewards of the month of Ramadan. So they always asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to permit them to live until the start of Ramadan. So we do the same. We ask Allah to allow us permission to live until Ramadan begins in about a week. This Ramadan is going to be unusual. One of the beautiful things of Ramadan is that it's an act of worship that's done as a group. So we each individually fast, but we know that every Muslim throughout the world is doing the exact same thing. And even within our communities, we know that we are all doing the same exact thing. And typically in the evenings, many masajid will have iftar in the masjid, and also will have, of course, the Taraweeh prayer after Isha prayer. And it's a joyful moment because all of the Muslims come together, they pray together. And this year, we're not going to have that. The masajid throughout the country, throughout the world now are closed. And we won't be able to meet, at least we know for the first 3 weeks of Ramadan, we'll not be able to meet for Taraweeh prayer. And it probably will extend all the way to the end of Ramadan. We're not sure yet of how long this is going to be. But it's in some way that is sad. I know to all of us, I've spoken with many Muslims in the past week. All of them, without exception, have been very sad at the fact that we are not going to be able to meet in the masjid. We kind of feel that something's missing this Ramadan. There's that sensation that we are together. And so today I want to talk to you a little bit about the importance of Ramadan and fasting, and a little bit about what we should be doing. Yes, we may not be meeting as a group in the masjid, but we still are each fasting, and everything that we did in the masjid, we can do at home. And we'll discuss a little bit about that as well. But before jumping into that, I want to remind all of you that in a way, this is a test from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for us, a reminder, because sometimes we take the masjid for granted. We kind of think it's there, we can always go. And now a virus that we can't even see with our eyes, not even with a microscope. You need an electron microscope. You need to magnify it hundreds of times just to be able to see it. This little virus is keeping the doors of the masjid closed. And to each and every one of us, that should enhance the value of the masjid in our hearts. It should really make us sit back and reflect on all those days we took it for granted that we had a masjid there. We had a masjid available to us. We had a masjid where we could go and pray together. And we no longer can do that because of a virus. And it's a demonstration of Allah's significant power. This isn't the first time that Muslims were not able to go to the masjid. In fact, there are a multitude of reasons throughout Islamic history, including plagues and diseases like this, that prevented Muslims from going to the masjid. But even in the modern day, oppression, if you look at our brothers in China, if you look at our brothers in Myanmar, if you look at refugees who are sitting in no man's land where there's not a masjid even for them to go to. This has been going on. This is not new. And perhaps Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to get that feeling a little bit, just to kind of feel their pain, because sometimes we also take them for granted. We've just kind of used to it. We just hear it all the time, and we don't think much about it. And maybe Allah is just reminding us that you have some brothers and sisters out there throughout the world who either don't have a masjid to go to, or by force are not allowed to enter the masjid. And it's a sad moment, but I also think it's a significant moment that brings us back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran often gives very clear directions to us as believers. And with fasting, he gave a very clear direction. In Surah Al-Baqarah, he has some beautiful ayat, and they aren't many, they're just a few ayat, but really they summarize the whole picture, really pretty much summarize everything that I'm going to talk about today, but in more depth. So I want to read to you some of those ayat, and I'll read the Quran, and then I'll read the English translation. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, من بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا كتب عليكم الصيام كما كتب على الذين من قبلكم لعلكم تتقون. O you who believe, fasting has been prescribed upon you as it was prescribed upon those who came before you, so that you may become pious. A profound verse. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, first of all, is addressing us as the believers, which means that's, when you address somebody with the most beautiful of descriptions, that means you love them. It's not a dictatorship. You're not, when you address someone and you're giving them an order and you're trying to ridicule them, you don't use the best name. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, oh you who believe, that is an honor. He is telling us that he loves us because we are believers. And he's saying to us that I have required you to fast. But don't think that it's such an onerous task, because others before you were also required to fast. So you're not unique. This isn't the first time that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala required a people to fast. And then he tells us the reason. You see, that's the beauty of Islam. It's not just do and don't do. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala always speaks to our mind, and he speaks to our heart as well. But he always tells us the why, so that we understand why we're doing something. And he tells us so that you can become more pious, so that you can become closer to Allah. It's not just a test of whether you can withstand hunger for a few hours or whether you can withstand thirst for a few hours. That's the easy part. In fact, for most of us, after the first 2-3 days of Ramadan, we get used to it. We don't think much about food and water until Maghrib time. It becomes a habit. So that's not the real test. That's the easy part. The harder part is developing that piety. And that's how you get the most out of your fasting. And that can happen whether you go to the masjid or whether you don't go to the masjid. Yes, going to the masjid will help that happen faster and better, because it's always easier to do things when you have other people supporting you in doing it, but it still can be done, even though we're not going to be able to go to the masjid during this Ramadan. But that one ayah kind of tells you the whole story, okay? Allah honors us and respects us. He addresses us by the most beautiful of names. And then he tells us, I am requiring you to fast. But don't be sad. Don't be overwhelmed. Don't think this is too much of a burden, because I've asked others before you to fast as well. And I'm doing it for a reason, and the reason is so that you may develop piety in your hearts. SubhanAllah. You have to be amazed at the eloquence of the language of the Quran and how it talks to our hearts, and how it's just so beautiful language, choice of words, choice of how the sentence is structured. and how he speaks to our mind. He respects us as human beings. He's not just telling us do this, do that. He's actually telling us why. He's comforting us at the same time. He's telling us it's not just you. I told others before you as well. And this idea of comforting us comes throughout almost every verse that talks about fasting. The next verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, أَيَّامًا مَعْدُودَاتٍ فمن كان منكم مريضا أو على سفر فعدة من أيام أخر وعلى الذين يطيقونه فدية طعام مسكين فمن تطوع خيرا فهو خير له وأن تصوموا خير لكم إن كنتم تعلمون. A specific number of days. So that's how the ayah starts. He says, I'm not going to ask you to fast for days you don't know how many. 1 year it's 40 days, 1 year it's 20 days, 1 year it's 100 days. No, he says from the beginning, it's a prescribed number of days. You're going to fast a certain number of days. And then immediately he says, and whoever of you is ill or traveling, then you can make it up at a later time. So you don't have to fast if you're sick or if you're traveling, because traveling is a burden. He says, it's okay. You can eat and drink. You don't have to fast, and you'll make it up at a later time. And then he immediately again comforts us. And those who find it a big burden, such as the elderly, for example, or those with illnesses that will never be cured, he says, there's a way out. They don't have to make it up in subsequent days. They can actually pay to feed a needy person. And then he says, whoever fasts, that's always better. And then he says, in kuntum ta'lamun, if you only knew. So again, he's talking to our mind and to our heart. He's saying this is an issue of knowledge. If you only knew the importance of fasting, if you only knew the value of fasting, if you only knew how much mercy Allah has upon you, and that he's giving all these exceptions, all these moments in the ayah where he's telling us, don't worry, if you're sick, you don't have to do it. You can make it up later. If you're traveling, you can make it up later. If you're sick and you will never be able to make it up, you still have a way out. You'll still get the reward by feeding a needy person. And then he goes on in the third ayah, which is a very concrete ayah, because it's where he kind of gives the ultimatum. This is what you have to do. شهر رمضان الذي أنزل فيه القرآن هدى للناس وبينات من الهدى والفرقان فمن شهد منكم الشهر فليصم ومن كان مريضا أو على سفر فعدة من أيام أخر يريد الله بكم اليسر ولا يريد بكم العسر ولتكملوا العدة ولتكبروا الله على ما هداكم وَلَعَلَّكُمْ تَشْكُرُونَ. The month of Ramadan in which the Quran was revealed. So now he told us it's going to be a certain number of days, and now he's telling us exactly when those days occur. He's saying it's the month of Ramadan. Okay, it's not, there's no guessing here. It's not 1 year it's Shawwal, 1 year Dhul Hijjah. No, every year it's the same month, the month of Ramadan. And he tells us the importance of the month of Ramadan, why he chose that as the month that we have to fast. He said that's the month in which the Quran was revealed. Now, you realize that in Ramadan, the Quran takes a central piece in our life. All the masajid, when we had them open every Ramadan, they tried to read the entire Quran. They took the whole month to read it, or 27 days of the month, because they tried to finish by the evening of the 27th. And the whole focus is on reading the entire Quran. Many individual Muslims will make a commitment to themselves, to Allah, to read the entire Quran during the month of Ramadan. Those who have trouble reading will make a commitment to learn how to read, to do better at reading. And those who read it well, or even those who don't read it well, make a commitment to understand it, to learn it, even if they learn just a few ayat, but still that in-depth learning ties them to the Quran, clings them to the Quran. And here is where you're going to make your Quran, your fasting productive. Don't forget the Quran during the month of Ramadan. It's important. That's the month in which the Quran was revealed. It has to be a part of your life. You know, if you're driving in your car and you have to go out to buy groceries, or you're an essential worker, or whatever it may be, put that Quran on and listen to it. This is the month to do that. when you're at home. You can't go to the masjid. You know, that time that you would have gone to the masjid, don't sit down and watch TV. You didn't do that anyway every year. Every year you went to the masjid. Sit down and read Quran. You're praying Taraweeh, read Quran during Taraweeh. I'm going to talk a little more about praying Taraweeh at home because there are certain issues there that we need to discuss. But don't separate from the Quran. This is the month for you to become attached to the Quran. And it takes effort. It's not easy. It actually takes effort. Allah says this is the month in which the Quran was revealed as a guidance to people, to all people. He didn't say, you know, he addressed us as the believers in the first ayah, but in this one, he doesn't say to the believers. He says to all people. That means the Quran has within it value for all of humanity. And that's what we Muslims are. We are here to do good for all of humanity, not just for ourselves. We're here to do good for all human beings. The Quran has guidance for all of humanity and clear guidance and evidence that separates good from bad. Whoever of you witnesses the month, so if you're alive and the month of Ramadan comes, then you must fast it. That's what it says. That's the prescription. The scholars say that means it's obligatory. Fasting is required. If you live till Ramadan, you must fast the month of Ramadan. Of course, unless you have an excuse where you can. And immediately he delves into the excuse. Again, that's part of Allah's mercy and comfort to us. He said, and whoever of you is sick or is traveling, then he can make it up in future days. He repeated it. Yes, he said it in the previous ayah. He said it again in this ayah. And then he goes even beyond that. He says, Allah wants to make this easy for you. He does not want to make it difficult. That's the mercy of Allah. I mean, can you imagine? He's giving us an order to do something, which we already do every year, and we know it's not that onerous. Yet how many times has he gone out of his way in these ayat to comfort us, to tell us, don't worry, it's going to be easy. I'm not going to make it hard. I don't want to make it hard. Yuridu, Allah wants to make it easy. He does not want to make it hard for you so that you can finish the number of days and so that you can glorify Allah on that to which he guided you, and so that you may be thankful. So all of this, so that in the end, we will be thankful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Thankful that he made us believers. Thankful that he enabled us to fast the month of Ramadan and reap the rewards of the month of Ramadan. Thankful that our sins are forgiven. The Prophet ﷺ said, whoever fasts Ramadan with true faith and wanting the benefit of Ramadan will have all his previous sins forgiven. Everything, gone, erased, as if they never happened. Allah says, be thankful. Just be thankful for that. That's it. Subhanallah. Beautiful ayat. And then something strange happens after that. So he's still talking. So I read to you 3 ayat from Surah Al-Baqarah. These are the 3 ayat of fasting. And then immediately in the midst of those, right there, he changes subject. He doesn't talk about fasting anymore. He talks about a different subject. He says, the next ayah immediately after the one I just read to you, he says, وَإِذَا سَأَلَكَ عِبَادِي عَنِّي فَإِنِّي قَرِيبٌ أُجِيبُ دَعْوَةَ الدَّاعِ إِذَا دَعَانِي فَلْيَسْتَجِيبُوا لِي وَلْيُؤْمِنُوا بِي لَعَلَّهُمْ يَرْشُدُونَ. And if my servants ask you about me, so now he's telling us to fast, and he has already demonstrated to us the qualities of mercy and kindness and compassion throughout these verses I just read you. And then he says, if after all that they ask you about me, Allah saying, if they ask you about me, now normally he should say, if they ask you, then you should tell them, because he's addressing Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But he doesn't do that. He goes directly to us. He said, if they ask you about me, I am near. I am near. Allah's close. He's not far. Allah's close. We are the ones who go away. He is close to us. We're the ones who depart far away from Allah. We just need to come back. He's there. We will find him there. He's close to us. He said, I am near, and I will answer the call of the supplicant. If you just turn to Allah and ask him, he is promising you, he will answer. He said, let them just respond to me and obey me, and let them believe in me. All we have to do is obey Allah. Fast the month of Ramadan. Obey Allah. And let them believe in me so that they will be guided the right way. SubhanAllah. He'll guide us in the right direction. All we have to do is come close to him, and the guidance from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will come. By the way, the ayah right after this goes back into talking about fasting, but I'm not going to focus on that. One thing that's very important to say about fasting is that it's not just a matter of not eating and not drinking. In fact, as I told you a little while ago, that's the easy part. After 2-3 days, we don't have a problem with it. The difficulty is correcting our behaviors during the month of Ramadan. And I feel that this particular Ramadan gives us a challenge there, because most people are at home, or are at home more than they normally would be. And sometimes when people are at home together for many, many hours, they get on each other's nerves. I mean, let's be honest. Things become irritating. Spouses become irritated with each other. The kids become irritated with their parents. The parents become irritated with the kids. If there is extended family, everyone gets irritated with each other. If there are close friends who happen to visit each other, they might get on each other's nerves, and it goes on and on. But while we're fasting, we have to pay close attention to our behavior, because that's the essence of what we're supposed to get out of it. Remember in the beginning, he said, so that you will become pious. Well, people who act badly and behave badly, they're not pious. To achieve that piety, we have to correct our hearts, and we have to correct our behaviors. The Prophet ﷺ told us this in a beautiful hadith. It's a hadith Qudsi. It's a long hadith, but I'm going to read it. I'm going to read it straight in the English translation. The hadith narrated by Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu. He said, the Prophet ﷺ said that Allah said, every action of the son of Adam is for his own benefit, except fasting. It is solely for Allah, solely for me. I give the reward for it. And he didn't tell us, by the way, what the reward was. He just said, I will give the reward. Now, we know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the most generous. So when he says, I'm going to give something, I guarantee you it's good. It's beyond your belief and imagination. It's amazing. And he didn't limit it. He didn't limit it, because he may in the beginning decide to give you something and then give you more, as he always does. And then the Prophet goes on to say, and fasting is a protective shield. So fasting is supposed to protect you. As-siyamu junnah. It's supposed to protect you. If one is fasting, he should not use foul language. He should not raise his voice. He should not behave foolishly. So he's teaching us not just not to eat and drink, but how we should actually act towards each other. He says, do not use foul language. Do not raise your voice. Do not behave foolishly. And if someone fights with you, what are you supposed to do? Fight back? No, not when you're fasting. You see, it's a time to correct behavior. He said, if someone fights with you, you should say, I'm a fasting person. You know what? I don't want to fight. I mean, you're upset and you want to fight, but I'm fasting. I can't. I don't want to fight. I don't want to. I'm putting all these bad behaviors in suspension. I'm not going to engage in them. I don't want to fight. That's what the Prophet's instructing us to say. He's actually telling us the words we're supposed to use. I am fasting. I'm a fasting person. Leave me alone. I don't want to deal with it. I'm not going to fight with you. And then he goes on to say, by the one in whose hand is the soul of Muhammad, the breath of the fasting person is better with Allah on the day of resurrection than the smell of musk. You know, when we fast, let's face it, we don't eat, we don't drink for many hours. Suddenly we have an odor that comes out of our mouth. And it's a foul odor. I mean, let's face it, we smell each other, it smells bad. Until we eat and drink something at a thought, it gets better. And he's reminding us that, yes, the physical discomfort of fasting, the physical discomfort that you feel, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sees it as something beautiful. And on the day of resurrection, it's like the smell of musk. And he's going to reward you for it. And then he said, the person who is fasting has 2 moments of joy. 2 moments of joy. Focus on this. 2 moments of joy. The first one is when he breaks his fast. Can you imagine you're thirsty all day? That first sip of water, it has a special meaning to you. Not just the physical meaning of quenching your thirst, but the sense that you accomplished an act of worship, that you finished one day of this tremendous pillar of Islam, that you actually did it, and you did it correctly, and you're hoping to get the reward for it. You're happy because of that. It's a joyful moment. And the second moment is when the fasting person meets his Lord. He will be happy that he fasted because that fasting is going to reap him tremendous rewards on the day of resurrection. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help us perfect our fast, not just by avoiding eating and drinking, but to also perfect our behaviors towards each other and to really enable us to soften our hearts and purify our hearts and to turn towards Allah and to increase our piety towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's a difficult thing. It's not easy. You know, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would not sit there and explain it to us if it were something simple. It's not. But we have to make the effort. And when you start making the effort, Allah will come and help you. Allah will come and make it easy for you. But again, if you don't put in the effort, you may not reap the reward. And that would certainly be a tragedy. That would certainly be a tragedy. The month of Ramadan is a month of ibadah. And ibadah in Arabic means worship. And it's not just the fasting. The prayers have to be perfected. All 5 obligatory prayers, the sunnah prayers, the taraweeh, which is a sunnah, should be done as much as you possibly can. Reading Quran, which we spoke about earlier, learning Quran. That's really important. You know, it's not just a matter of reading. Yes, you get reward for that, even if you don't understand it, even if you don't have command of the language, you still get reward by opening the Quran and reading it. But trying to understand it is for your benefit. And it's worthwhile to spend some time during Ramadan investing your time in learning the meaning of the Quran. And if you're not sure, ask. There are people who do know, but there are multiple resources online. In other words, where you can look up things and really get an in-depth understanding in any language you could think of about a particular verse or a particular meaning of the Quran. But there are some other actions that you can take during the month of Ramadan that constitute acts of worship. Many Muslims pay their zakah during the month of Ramadan because there's a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that when you do an obligatory action in Ramadan, the rewards are multiple. So you don't only just get the reward of doing the required ibadah, you actually get multiples of that reward. And so people pay their zakah or prefer to pay their zakah during the month of Ramadan. Now, it does not have to be. This is not a requirement, but many Muslims have become used to that. So if you are one of those people whose zakat date is in one of the days of Ramadan, begin doing your calculations now, because you have to figure out how much you're going to have to pay, and you're going to have to figure out who you're going to pay it to. And it's a little bit difficult now because we're all in this social distancing and isolation. So it's going to take more time to get the funds in the hands of those who need it. And so plan ahead and try to do things early during the month. But aside from zakah, also people pay sadaqah. They pay the charity. You can do anything you wish in the month of Ramadan. There are so many Muslims, our brothers and sisters, our children throughout the world who are hungry, who are living in tents, who don't have food or water. And by the way, they're also under social distancing and isolation, just the way we are, because this disease has affected the entire world. And yet, on top of their daily challenge of poverty, lack of food, lack of clean water, they also have to deal with trying to not get infected with a virus that could potentially kill them. And it's a tremendous challenge to them. And our money can help them. It's not our money, by the way, it's the money of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But by us paying that money to them, it will be a tremendous help for them. Even though we cannot go to the masjid, the Prophet ﷺ describes, there's a beautiful hadith in which he speaks about 7 kinds of people on the day of resurrection. And these are people who on the day of resurrection will be in the shade of Allah. It's going to be hot on the day of resurrection. The sun is going to be right above our heads. But there are 7 kinds of people who will be shaded from that sun. They will be protected from the heat. Those 7 people will be in the shade of Allah. And he describes the 7 people. And one of them is رَجُلٌ قَلْبُهُ مُعَلَّقٌ بِالْمَسَاجِدِ. A man or a person whose heart is clinged to the masjid. He didn't say his body. He didn't say a man who's present in the masjid. He said a man whose heart is attached to the masjid. And yes, we cannot go to the masjid during this blessed month that's coming upon us, but our hearts are always going to be attached to the masjid. There are a lot of people who cannot go. You know, there are people who throughout the year are bedbound. They can't even get out of bed. They're sick, they're paralyzed, but their hearts are with us in the masjid when we go. Their hearts are attached to the masjid. And our hearts have to be attached to the masjid. Don't lose that attachment. Don't lose that attachment. In fact, enrich it during the month of Ramadan. I want to say a word about the masajid. Even though we cannot go, the masjid still has to survive. It still has expenses. It still has to pay for electricity and water and this and that and cleaning and so forth. There are always expenses. You in your own home, you still have expenses. The masjid has expenses, and we have to support our masajid. Don't think that just because we're not going there that suddenly they don't have to pay anything. No, they still have quite a few expenses. And by the way, you don't have to go there to drop off your donation. You can do it online. You can send a check by mail. There are so many different ways that you can support the masjid. And the masjid needs your support. Don't forget that. Make sure your heart is clinged to the masjid. Make sure your heart is attached. And one way you do that is by donating to the masjid, because that's going to force you to think about the masjid and about the needs of the masjid. And after all, this is your masjid. It's not someone else. You know, we don't have big Islamic governments that are going to support the masjid and keep paying the bills. No, we have to pay the bills. And each to their own ability. Some people can pay $5, some people can pay $500. Whatever you can, you must do to keep the masjid functioning, so that when, inshallah, Allah will bring us back to the masjid, it'll still be there and it'll still be operational. And we can go in from day one and use it and be thankful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He led us back into His house. Here we are now, shielded away from the house of Allah. But don't think this is going to last. Allah will bring us back into His house. Don't lose that attachment to the masjid. We have to have it during the month of Ramadan. I want to talk a little bit, and this is going to be probably the last thing I'm going to talk about, or maybe second to last, but I want to talk about what we're going to do at home. I mean, we're not going to go to the masjid, so we're going to sit at home. Or what are we going to do? First thing, I talked about reading Quran. Make sure you put in an effort to do that. You have more time on your hands, so make sure you do that. Secondly, and alhamdulillah, all the masajid, not just in our area in Santa Clarita, but all the masajid really throughout the country, even throughout the world, have very quickly adopted technology to continue to bring knowledge to the believers. So every masjid has programs, whether it's a virtual khutbah, whether it's a lecture, whether it's Quran reading sessions. So every masjid has programs or is developing programs that will be available during the month of Ramadan. Show your participation. Jump online and participate as if you were there. Yes, you're physically not there, but you can still participate just as you're doing today and participating and listening to my talk. But there are so many others and a lot of good people with a lot of knowledge who are willing to share that knowledge and willing to put in the time to teach us and help us learn more about our faith. And we should support them by listening to them. And we should support the masjid by participating. The Taraweeh prayer, we cannot do it in the masjid, but we certainly can do it at home. The scholars have discussed this issue at some length, whether we can do it at home or we cannot do it at home. And I'm not going to go through all the details of the arguments of fiqh, but I can tell you that the bottom line is the vast majority of scholars say you can do it at home. It's better to do it in the masjid, but it is permissible to do it at home. And in fact, it's encouraged to do it at home if you cannot go to the masjid. So pretty much there's a consensus, almost not 100%. There are some scholars who say doing it at home is better than doing it at the masjid, but frankly, they're in the minority. But the vast majority of scholars say it's better to do it in the masjid, but you are allowed to do it at home. It's permissible, particularly when you cannot go to the masjid. And you can do it as an individual prayer, so you can pray on your own, or you can do it at home as a jama'ah with your kids and your spouse or your brother or sister, whoever is there. You can do it as a jama'ah, but it's not required. You can do it by yourself as well. The same way you do it in the masjid. Pray Isha, pray the 2 rak'ahs sunnah after Isha, and then pray the Taraweeh, whether you pray 8 or 20. And I know the whole 8 versus 20 the discussion. Both are valid. I mean, praying 8 is acceptable. The Prophet ﷺ prayed 8. Praying 20 is also acceptable. Inshallah, even more reward. Inshallah, the more you pray, the more reward. So whatever you can. If you can pray 8, pray 8. If you can pray 20, may Allah give you strength, and pray 20. And then after you finish the Taraweeh, pray the Witr. Same way you do in the masjid. We pray 3 rak'ahs of Witr. Pray them. And make a dua. Now, a lot of people have asked me in the past couple of days, they've said, well, we want to pray Taraweeh at home, but we don't memorize that much of the Quran. How are we going to do this? So I want to spend a little bit of time on the details of that. So you can read what you know. That's one way of doing it. You don't have to do the same thing we do in the masjid. In the masjid, we tend to try to read a whole juz'ah in one day. You don't have to do that. You can read what you know, just the verses you memorize. Even if you read the same thing day after day after day, it's okay, as long as you do the prayer. The prayer is what's important. And you can read whatever you know. Now, can you open the Quran and read from it by looking at it? There's some controversy amongst the scholars, and I want to discuss that so that everyone feels comfortable, because I know some people feel very uncomfortable about that, and some people have very strong opinions about it. But frankly, the scholars didn't really have that strong of opinion about it, but they did opine on it. So there is an opinion out there. And I will tell you, the opinion is that all of the scholars say it is permissible to open the Quran, the Mus'haf, the actual book, and read from it during the Taraweeh prayer, except the Imam Abu Hanifa. Imam Abu Hanifa said it's not permissible. And Imam Abu Hanifa, by the way, has, if you look at the Hanafi madhab, they have the largest following in the Muslim world. So it's a big deal when Imam Abu Hanifa says, no, it's not permissible. However, after the death of the Imam Abu Hanifa, 2 of his students, who are scholars in their own right, Abu Yusuf and Muhammad, both of them are direct students of an Imam Abu Hanifa. After his death, they changed their opinion on this issue. They said it is permissible. It is permissible. Now, however, it's better if you have the Quran memorized to read it from memory. That's what they said. It's better if you read it from memory, but it is allowed if you don't have Quran memorized to read it from the book while you are doing the prayer. So the Hanafi madhab, in essence, has 2 opinions about this matter. The opinion of the Imam Abu Hanifa himself, and the reasoning that behind his opinion. He didn't just say it's not permissible. He actually explained why he felt it was not permissible. He said, because it is similar to the way that the people of the book pray. So when you look at Christians and Jews, when they pray, they actually hold the book and read it. So he said, we should not imitate them in our acts of worship when we are doing our worship. So that was his reasoning. Imam Abu Yusuf, his follower, his student, and Imam Muhammad, also his student, they reversed because they said there is nothing wrong with looking at the Quran. In fact, looking at the Quran is an ibadah. You actually are rewarded for reading from the Quran. So how can we say it's not permissible? And that it's not really imitating the Christians or the Jews in terms of how they do their prayer, as long as your intent is not to imitate them. Now, if the intent is I want to read from the Quran so that I'm similar to the Jews, then that's different. Then you have a bigger problem than whether it's permissible to read from the Mus'haf or not. But that's rarely the issue. Most of the time we read from the Mus'haf because we don't have it memorized and we want to read the Quran. So based on that, they said that it's rare that any believer would actually intentionally say, I want to imitate the Christians and the Jews and how they worship, and so I'm going to open the book and do it just on purpose to imitate them. so intention is very important in Islam. As we know, in all of our acts of worship, intention is the key. And again, they said if the intention is pure, then there's nothing wrong with it, because the act of opening the Quran and reading in and of itself is actually not only halal, it's actually something you are rewarded for. It's something that's encouraged to do. So that's the scholarly opinion on this issue. And again, do what you feel comfortable with. I mean, honestly, it's you look at it, and there are arguments on both sides. All the scholars who say it's permissible, they say we should encourage people to read the Quran. And so if opening the Mus'haf and reading during the Salah is going to make them do that, then there's nothing wrong with that. And in fact, they get rewarded. So different opinions on this issue. And again, in the end of the day, do what you feel comfortable doing. Do what you feel that your heart is comfortable doing. I would encourage you to when you do that, if you decide to do that, and you read Quran during Taraweeh, and you come across a verse that you find interesting, or you find difficult to understand, or you're not exactly sure what the message is, after you finish your Taraweeh, spend 15 minutes after the witr, spend 15 minutes looking it up. And you can do this on your phone. I mean, if you have a phone, you can do it on your computer, whatever. You can just Google it and you will get tons of answers. But try to understand it. Try to at least understand one ayah. If you understand one ayah every day, every night, you'll have 30 ayat by the end of the month. It will be a tremendous learning opportunity for all of us. The last item that I want to emphasize during this month of Ramadan is kind of a reminder more than anything. We have seen in the build-up to this epidemic or pandemic that we are in the midst of, some really disturbing human behavior. We have seen people raid supermarkets and buy food and other goods, paper towels and bathroom tissue, in excessive quantities. It's a display of human greed. It's a display of tremendous selfishness. We live in a country where there is an excess of food. There's no need to go out and hoard food the way people did, but they did it out of fear. And they were driven by selfishness and by greed. And I hate to say that, but that's the truth. And even now, we've been into this thing for more than a month and a half. You go to a supermarket today, you're going to still see empty shelves. It's tragic. We Muslims should set the example. One of the things we do wrong repeatedly during Ramadan is we prepare excess food. We need to be careful and cognizant of that. Watch your budget, watch your food. There are a lot of people in our community, in our location, who are out of work. They are in trouble. We have to reach out to them and help them. We should not be throwing away food. That is a tragedy if we do that. And I'm just reminding ourselves, I'm reminding myself as well, of just people in our realm. But imagine throughout the world, there are Muslims who can't even find food. There are Muslims who find food, and when they find it, it's already rotted. There are Muslims who eat expired food because that's all they can get. That's all they can afford. And how tragic is it when our own brothers and sisters can't find food, and yet we throw away food because we prepared excess food or we bought too much food? Be careful. We should be very cognizant of that and very alert to that reality. And we should not get caught up in this excessive fear that the world is coming to an end. And if we don't start hoarding and we don't start cooking, then we're going to be left hungry. That's not going to happen. Inshallah, it's not going to happen. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is there. He's the one who will provide for us. Never have a doubt. That's what we Muslims believe. Allah is there and he will provide for us. We're not going to go out there and start accumulating things that are going to expire and be thrown away at the end. That is truly a tragic thing. And Ramadan is the time for us to be aware of that and to be cognizant of that, because it is a time when we have a tendency to prepare excess food. At least historically, that's what Muslims have done. And I think this year it should be different. I think this year we should train ourselves not to do so. And with that, I want to thank you all for attending, and I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to reward all of you. And I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to lift this calamity that has afflicted the entire world. I ask Allah to protect the children and to protect the elderly, because they are the most vulnerable, and to protect the sick people. There are a lot of people with illnesses who are very vulnerable to this virus, and if they get sick, they may not survive. And I ask Allah to protect all of us and to lift this calamity and to end it sooner rather than later. And I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to open the doors of the house of Allah soon, so that we can go back, so that we can again meet as brothers and sisters together, and so that we can pray to Allah and do so feeling that sense of love that we have for each other, love for the sake of Allah, not for anything in this world. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله. Inshallah, we will answer some questions. Trying to see if I can see the questions. Oh boy, okay, yes. Okay, so should I just read the questions and kind of then read the answer, inshallah?
Yes, please.
Okay, so what ayat of Surah Al-Baqarah? Yes, I can tell you. These are ayah number 183 in Surah Al-Baqarah onward. Oh, that's already answered. Hamad answered. Jazakallah khair. Thank you. Yes, these are ayat of Surah Al-Baqarah. Next question, it says, during the current COVID-19 pandemic, do you think it is safe to have an iftar and prayer with a small group of friends at home with adequate precautions? So first of all, there's a lot of detail in response to that question. The first thing is no more than 10. So that's the order of the governor, and that's the order of the mayor. So the answer is no gathering bigger than 10 people. However, I will add to that, none of those people should be above the age of 65. If they are, I really don't think this is a good idea to have a small group of gathering with someone above the age of 65, because they are particularly vulnerable. Remember that you could be infected and you could shed virus, meaning you could transfer virus to another person, even though you don't have any symptoms. You may not have fever, cough, shortness of breath the first 48 hours that you get infected. So there is a real risk there. Adequate precautions, it's a little bit difficult to do that, because really, I mean, true adequate precautions means masks and gloves. And how are you going to eat, with a mask? It's really quite difficult. I mean, you're going to have to take the mask off. And so I would really exercise caution. I think just the small families within the household who are living together anyway. So I would discourage that practice. But again, I'm speaking, I think, as a medical doctor at this point. There's no really religious ruling on this issue. The religious ruling is to follow the directions of the authorities. And that's the religious ruling from multiple Islamic organizations, including Azhar University, including the Fiqh Council of North America, including the Association of Muslim Jurists of North America, and many others. But from a medical standpoint, and I probably shouldn't be saying that. I mean, I'm not here in the capacity of a doctor, but I'm just telling you as a physician who's dealing with this issue, that I would be very cautious about that. So I would not recommend. Next question is, for learning the meaning of the Quran, what sources are available which are different than online and published literature? Is there one-on-one guidance available if someone is stuck at a point? Not teaching the whole concept, but to clear a point. And which book will you refer one should start with for reading the meaning of the Quran? That's an excellent question. And really, I think a tremendous question, actually. I mean, whoever's asking the question is right. I mean, it's difficult sometimes to just read something online and because it's not clear, or it might raise additional questions that come to your mind that you may not have an answer to. And sometimes you feel you want to talk to someone, like one-on-one, and say, what does this mean? Alhamdulillah, there are a lot of people who are available who you can ask. Every masjid in Santa Clarita, there are multiple imams who come through and give the Friday khutbah, and most of them are more knowledgeable than me, but please, ask any of them. They will be able to help you, if not directly answer the question, guide you to someone who will help answer that question. In terms of what book to read, there are multiple books available. The one that I would recommend is the Tafsir of Ibn Kathir. The Tafsir of Ibn Kathir is and it's translated in English, and it's available online, free. And actually, there's an app on the phone for Tafsir Ibn Kathir, Arabic and English, and it's also free. You can download it, and you don't have to pay any money. It's concise, easy to understand, and fairly complete. So I think it's a good place to start to try to understand certain verses of the Quran. It's an excellent question. Thank you very much. Next question is, this is a question from a community member. During the current COVID-19 epidemic, do you think it is safe to have an iftar and prayer with a small group? I think we answered that question. All right. Is there any specific dhikr that can be done during this Ramadan for protection from illness? So the answer is yes, there are quite a few, but it's any dua is good, of course, but reading Ayatul Kursi is an important thing to do. Reading the mu'awwadhat, قل هو الله أحد قل أعوذ برب الفلق قل أعوذ برب الناس. The Prophet ﷺ used to read those to protect himself. Paying sadaqah protects you. So it's not just a matter of dhikr and reading Quran, also paying sadaqah protects you. And there are so many others, and there are a lot of books that have those available for you if you would like to see that. Next question, are we likely to have Eid al-Fitr prayer? Inshallah, make a dua to Allah that we have it together. Eid al-Fitr is going to be towards the end of May. The current stay-at-home order is in effect till May 15. If they truly lift it after May 15, then we may be able to have Eid al-Fitr prayer. However, I'm just talking now, again, from a medical standpoint, I don't think they're going to lift it entirely. I don't think they're going to allow large gatherings. So we may be able to have Eid al-Fitr on a more limited basis, but we may have to have multiple prayers throughout the city at different locations. I think that's what may happen, where we'd have to limit the number of people who show up to each location and each timing. So we'll have to see how this goes. I don't think we really know. There are some signs here in Santa Clarita, alhamdulillah, that the number of cases is beginning to stabilize. So it's not declining yet, but at least stabilizing, which is very reassuring. They are counting the cases on a day-by-day basis. So we probably will know more in a couple of weeks. I think we'll have a better sense of where this is going to go. Just out of curiosity, can fasting increase the risk of COVID-19? Excellent question. I mean, this is a question that actually has been looked at, believe it or not. People have been talking about this. The theory is that would the dryness of the mouth make you more susceptible to getting COVID-19? That's one concern. The second concern is, does fasting make your immune system weaker so that if you do get infected, you would get sicker? So there's really no evidence for either one of those things. So this whole theory of the dry mouth is kind of a made-up thing. I mean, there's no science behind it that a dry mouth makes you more susceptible. So as a scientist and a physician, I have to tell you that no, there is no evidence that fasting increases the risk of COVID-19. In terms of the immune system, no. I mean, really, we fast for a short period of time. I mean, it's not an entire day. It's 14, 16 hours, whatever it may be. is not enough to really induce a change in the immune system. The kind of fasting that will affect the immune system is starvation fasting. So these are people who cannot eat. Such we see sometimes in certain droughts in Africa. This happens where people don't eat, don't have access to food for days on end. When that happens, then the immune system will become weaker. But for the short period of time that we fast during the day in Ramadan, that's not sufficient to affect the immune system in any way. So no, short answer is I don't think that fasting increases the risk of COVID-19. So a question from a community member, can we pray 8 rak'ahs of Taraweeh? That's the first question. And is Taraweeh a substitute for Tahajjud? So I'll answer the first question. Yes, you can pray 8 rak'ahs. The Prophet ﷺ prayed 8 and most of the time. So the answer is yes. 8 is perfectly acceptable. 20 is also acceptable. I mean, there's nothing that says it's haram. You know, you never say to anyone that praying is haram. That's never, the case. So if you want to pray 20, that's fine. If you want to pray 8, that's also fine. It's acceptable. And inshallah, Allah will accept whatever we do. Is Taraweeh a substitute for Tahajjud? Well, it's kind of, this is an issue of semantics. So Tahajjud is a night prayer. So it's a prayer in the evening, and really, technically, it's any time after Isha. So Tahajjud is any time after Isha all the way to before Fajr. You can do it at that time. A lot of people say Tahajjud is after the middle of the night. So you'd have to see, what time is Isha and what time is Fajr, and you find the middle point. And after that is considered Tahajjud. It's not really a substitute. In a way, Taraweeh is a form of night prayer that is special to Ramadan. If you want to pray, if you pray Taraweeh and then you want to wake up before Fajr and pray additional, may Allah accept from you. There's nothing wrong with doing that. It's permissible to do that, inshallah, no problem. Let's see, are there any other questions? I don't think I see any other questions. Do you want to open the mics for people to ask verbally if they don't want to type, or how does the host feel about that? I'm not sure what the rules are of this game.
I think the folks who need to ask questions can unmute themselves and ask the questions also. So I encourage the community who's listening in, if they have questions and they don't want to type, they can definitely mute themselves and ask the question.
Okay. So if anyone has any questions, just unmute your mic and speak up. Please introduce yourself and then speak up. Okay, looks like nobody has any questions.
I have a question, Dr. Abedin. This is Ahid. Is it possible for the masjid, or maybe this is a question for the masjid, to hook us up with needy Muslim brothers within the community with whom we could share perhaps maybe iftar and dinner during this time, or we could maybe give them some zakat money or sadaqah?
Jazakallah khair. I think that's a wonderful question. Undoubtedly, there are members in our community who have lost their job or have reduced hours or have lost income, and they might be hurting. I mean, I would encourage the authorities at the masjid to really try to, number one, beware of those people and be in touch with them. And to make the process in such a way that it's not an embarrassment to anybody. So if the masjid could kind of act as a third party in between, so that people could, donate or give zakat to the masjid, and then the masjid would take on the task of distributing that, so that it wouldn't be person to person, because that may create some awkward feelings. I think it would be better to do it through the masjid. I would encourage the masjid to do that, because we are obligated to help each other. I mean, this is not just out of the goodness of our heart. It's our obligation as Muslims to help each other in a time of need, and this is indeed a time of need. The whole economy is collapsing. I mean, everyone has been affected. I don't think there's anyone who hasn't been. But there are others who've been devastated. So there are people amongst us, I'm sure, who've been devastated by this economic collapse. Loss of job, loss of income, their housing may be threatened. And I commend you for raising this point, and I encourage strongly the masjid authorities to be an active participant in trying to bring together those in need and those who are willing to help and donate together, and to try to be a conduit to make sure that they receive the funds that they need.
I think that's a really good question. So Zahid Bhai, just to address that, there is a program at the masjid. We collectively, we decide we have people that we know about that are deserving and are in need. And especially like Dr. Abedin said, in this time, there are people who are identifying their need to us, to the masjid, for privacy purposes. I think the way that we would like to do this is for the community to donate to the masjid, identify that this is either a sadaqah or a zakah, and then we have people that we reach out to that we know are in need, and we can donate sums of money that are useful for them for the period of time.
Yeah, no, since we're not having any iftar at the masjid, we were paying like $350 per family or whatever. So at least that much, and maybe some more. A lot of families should be able to give, and then I'm sure it'll help whoever needs it. So, okay, we'll do that, inshallah.
Jazakallah khair, and may Allah reward you for bringing that up, because it's a very important point. Jazakallah khair, inshallah.
Okay.
I think Brother Jamshid has his hand raised.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. How are you?
Alhamdulillah. Dr. Abdin, as always, it is a pleasure to see your smiling face, and may Allah give you a lot of barakat for sharing your knowledge with us. On the point of donating, I know a Muslim international student who has fallen on very dire financial straits. So if you want, I can share his information with you later on after, tonight or something, and then you can disseminate the information to everybody else. I also sent out the information, the request on the various chat groups that we have on WhatsApp within the community. So whatever can be given, I even shared his bank account information and everything. Whatever can be shared with him, $5, $10, $100, whatever. At least through this difficult time, that would be, I think that would be really deserving for that person.
Jazakallah khair. May Allah reward you. That's excellent, inshallah. Yes, inshallah. Any other questions or comments?
Unmute this girl. Say anything. Say it. Assalamu alaikum. This is Zainab, and I have a question if you have a few minutes.
Okay. Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
We see the concept of these drive-thrus going on everywhere. So my kids were wondering that if somebody wants to sponsor an iftar at masjid, and they can provide the iftar, and is there a concept of like drive-through iftar, or do you think that's not feasible at all? Come in, get their iftar and go home and pray.
From an Islamic perspective, no, I think there's nothing wrong with that.
Just from a social or Islamic perspective.
From an Islamic perspective, I don't see any problem with that, as long as we maintain the rules, meaning social distancing, wearing masks, and yes, I don't see any problem with that at all. But I don't know, I can't speak for the masjid authorities. I don't know if they want to delve into that, because there are some issues with workers in a food situation. They have certain rules, masks, gloves, even distancing amongst the workers. So there may be some issues that have to be worked out, but I'll leave that to the authorities of the masjid. But I think that's a good idea if it can be done. That way, at least it'll be something available to those in need, or not just those in need. I mean, sometimes there are people who, you know, they're students, or they, you know, they don't know how to cook, or they can't cook, or they don't have the ability, and maybe they relied on the iftar at the masjid during Ramadan, and they may find something like that, you know, to be useful. I don't know, but I'll defer to the masjid on how, you know, how they want to do that. But these are, you know, very good creative ideas that I think should be explored. Inshallah.
Okay, thank you for your answer.
Any other questions or? Okay. All right. Well, I don't see any other questions at this time. So inshallah, I want to thank you all for attending and for listening. And I ask Allah to reward you and reward all of us, inshallah, and to lift this calamity that we're seeing, and always make the dua, please, every night, make the dua that we go back to the masjid, inshallah, in the soonest possible time. I ask Allah to open the doors of His house again to all of us so that we can go back. Jazakumullah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you, Dr. Abdin.
Thank you, Dr.